Good morning, my friends. Today I'm going to speak about a subject that has become very important to me. Yesterday I had the pleasure and the privilege of attending the George Washington lecture at USC Price School of Public Policy at USC. It was about a conversation with David Hume Kennerly, a Pulitzer Prize winner photograph, about portraits of power. All his career has been focused on making portraits of the people in power, of presidents of the United States. He's taken pictures of 9 presidents. He made a small review of the context and then he went into details. But what struck me the most about this is that it addressed a subject I have been researching for a while now, and it's the impact of visual information, visual records versus written records. And he said it again, and I've heard this many times: one picture is worth 1,000 words. And it's true. And he gave us a lot of explanations around that, and it was amazing, very interesting. He started showing us the importance of portraits during history, and how photography and portraits are very important in moving opinion, in moving people around the world. Today, he says, has been magnified by the presence of social media, where a picture taken now, it's known around the world in a couple minutes. But he says, it has always been like this. What happens is now it's magnified, it's happening more and faster. But since the time of painting the portraits, these portraits were really influential of public opinion and political situations around the world. He told us about how monarchs and kings had their portraits done with looking far away, without looking in the eye to anyone, and not allowing anyone to look at them at the eye, because they had this divine right that came from God to be the kings. And then he moves to America. He starts with George Washington, and he shows us how he even mocks the portraits of the kings, and having a very similar way of standing, but looking in the eye to the observer, to the one who's looking at the picture. This didn't happen with kings. And we really don't know how George Washington looked like, but his famous portrait that it's in the $1 bill, it's the one that we have in our minds. But he said maybe he didn't look different, and if he appeared in person today, he might be called an impostor until he shows credentials. So that is the real thing. But he said it was very important. The pictures of George Washington were widely shown around the country. He had many of them made, and his portraits were very influential in the political scenario. Then he starts making a review of how photography and portraits influenced politics since the beginning. He shows us who was the first president to have a photograph portrait of him. It was John Quincy Adams. He had it done many years after he left office. And the first president who had a photograph portrait, and that he even used it in his campaign very successfully, was Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln said that he was president because of his campaign portrait and the speech he gave. That is very impressive to hear that at those times in the mid-1850s. And then he starts making a very short review of how well some presidents have done with portraits and photographs, and how bad others have. He says that Lincoln was outstanding, that his portraits in the photograph are very clear and show very clearly his personality. He refers to President Harding and Calvin Coolidge, and he says that their pictures were awful, that they shouldn't have posed for that, and he said there are examples of bad photography used in politics. He also mentions President Theodore Roosevelt as a star in photography. He was very good at that, he even liked taking pictures. And then he goes all the way to John F. Kennedy, and he said he was amazing. He had the ability to involve his family in his photographs. He used them pretty well. His photographs always had an impact in opinion, had political effects. And there is this photograph, he's showing his back in the Oval Office, looking at his desk, and it seems like he's taking a very, very thoughtful decision. And when he was asked, what were you doing at that moment, he said, no, I was reading the New York Times. So many times portraits are misinterpreted, and we will have another example of that later on. So he talks about that. Then he shows us a lot of pictures of LBJ, of Lyndon B. Johnson, and he says that he really liked photograph, that he always called, the first day in office, he hired a photograph full-time to take pictures of him in every situation. So we had several portraits of Johnson, and it was amazing to see how he aged during presidency. He was always afraid of dying in office, and many people say if he had won the re-election, probably he had died in office. But he was only 60, a little bit under 60 when he finished his presidency, and he looked like an 80 years old person. He aged very much. It was a lot of stress, and he had all the Vietnam and many things on him during his tenure. After that, he gives us a small review at this point of Nixon, and he says he started getting involved in photography during Nixon, but specifically with Spiro Agnew, the first vice president Nixon had before Gerald Ford. And he says that Nixon had some great pictures, but some other that weren't that good. He wasn't perfect at using photography and portraits to address the opinion. And then he showed us one series of photographs, sequence of the last minutes of Nixon in office, and he is very serious, very sad, you could say, in the moment he's leaving the White House. But at some point they show us his famous gesture of going like that while he's riding the helicopter, and people always say, wow, this is a very sad moment for him, for America, first president to renounce power, and why is he smiling and doing the view of victory? Well, what happened is that at that moment, the staff of the White House came out and gave him a last applause, and he was greeting them. He was thanking his staff. So again, as I told you, sometimes photographs and pictures are misinterpreted, and they don't mean the message that goes through. After Nixon, and during that time, before Nixon, during Johnson, Kennerly decides to go to Vietnam. And he decides to go to Vietnam for several reasons. First of all, because he wanted to register what was going on there with the troops. There is a belief that troops don't like photographers to be around, but he said that in Vietnam that was not the case, that the troops were grateful, that they liked to have people recording what was going on over there, and that I think was very valuable. Said, for me it was important to be with our troops, to recognize and show the world what was going on there, and also he said, I wanted to honor my colleagues, the photographs that risked their lives, that some of them, dozens of them, has lost their life during their work in dangerous countries or locations. So he wanted to honor them. Once he finishes that, he came back to America, and his thought was, all these people, all these soldiers that were in a very painful situation, that American generation who was raised in a scenario of comfort was suddenly shocked by having to go to an environment that was very dangerous, where their life was at risk. And that hurt that generation and America, and changed America forever. So he said, while these people are risking their life and giving their life for us over there, those decisions are made in Washington by some gentlemen in some very luxurious and comfortable offices. And these people are never going to be in that situation, they're never going to be there. I want to register and know how these people are. So he starts making pictures, as I told you, Spiro Agnew, briefly with Nixon, and then he met Gerald Ford, and he was appointed by Gerald Ford as his full-time photographer. Ford was a little bit like Lyndon Johnson, very informal. Johnson once made a cabinet meeting in his room while he was in bed in his pajamas, and he shows us the picture. Ford didn't got that far, but he was very informal. He was a family man. He always showed a family environment, and Kennerly really admires him. Today he is part of the board of the Ford Presidential Library, so you can say that he's very, very close to the Ford family, and he really respects and admires Gerald Ford. And he showed me a face that I didn't know Gerald Ford had. He grew on me yesterday. I wasn't aware of that. He closes his Ford era with a very, very nice picture, very funny picture of Betty Ford dancing on top of the cabinet meeting board table in the White House. It's very funny. This picture was never published at that time. Many years after, he asked the permission of Miss Betty Ford, and she allowed him to publish it, and I will have it included in this video. It's really, really, really fun. After that, then he goes on. He doesn't mention Jimmy Carter. He then goes to Ronald Reagan. He made a couple of pictures of Reagan. The one that is also in this video with the 5 presidents, it's in the inauguration of the Reagan Presidential Library. And he says that all the 5 presidents are looking in another direction except Reagan, who's looking at him. Said that was a very friendly and very nice gesture from President Reagan towards him, and he's always grateful with Reagan for doing that at the moment he shot the picture. After Reagan, he talks very nicely about President George H. Bush, and he had the opportunity of shooting many pictures of him as vice president and as president. Then he practically ignores Clinton. He says that Clinton could have done a great presidency, but the Lewinsky scandal ruined everything for him. He talks a lot better of Hillary than of Bill. He really admires Hillary. He has several good pictures of Hillary in those times and in modern times. And then he goes to President George W. Bush. He had a very close and very nice relationship with him. He was with him the night of the elections, while he was the first elections, while he was governor of Texas in Austin. He was at his house. He shared a couple of moments with him. He shows a picture of him making sure her daughters that were going out that night were wearing a jacket because it was cold. So this gives a sense of family man also, and he really liked that. And he was there when Vice President Gore conceded and then took it back. He was with President Bush when Gore took it back, and he was really angry. But at the end, he says they had a laugh about that. And that shows us that he was very close with George W. Bush. It's important that he doesn't mention if he is part of any political party, but he seems closer to Republican presidents. He has had more closer relationship. However, he doesn't like President Trump. He said he was not even going to mention his name, and he didn't. So that can tell us that even among people who like Republicans, he is not liked. That is a painful situation for America today. So after Bush, he goes to Obama. He admires Obama. He says he had the virtue of keeping his children outside of the picture of the presidency. He said not every president has done that, and it's respectful to do it or not to, but that he didn't do it. And however, he was able to keep a family environment. He valued and made it clear through photographs and portraits that he had a very, very loving relation with his wife Michelle, and that was very nice. And he shows us a picture of Michelle Obama hugging President George W. Bush and showing that even if they are in different sides of the alley, they can still have a good relationship and for the benefit of America work together in things of common interest. So that was a very nice gesture of Michelle Obama with Bush, according to his opinion. And finally, he makes a very brief commentary of President Trump without mentioning his name, as I said. He says that he has had the chance of taking pictures of 9 presidents, and he has seen how they do the moment they win, when they win the nomination, when they win the presidency, and they are always joyful and smiling, and laughter comes around everywhere. He even says that when George H. Bush won, he took a couple of pictures, many pictures of him, while the confetti was coming under him, like it was under a rain of confetti. He said, this is going to be a great success, I'm going to make all the covers. When he then looked, there was no roll in the camera. He said that happens even to the most experienced photographers. So he thanks digital photograph for avoiding this kind of incidents currently. So he says, the great difference is that President Trump, in the moment that he knows he won, he didn't smile, he didn't laugh. He's very concerned and serious. And in the back you can see Vice President Pence even more serious and more concerned. And his lecture, his reading of this episode is probably they didn't expect it. They didn't expect to win, and they thought that winning was not as good as losing. So maybe that's why some of the attitudes of President Trump are how they are. Finally, he says that he had the opportunity while working for CNN, while he works currently, to make a photo studio of President Trump. He did it. President Trump asked him if he could see the pictures in the back of the camera that has a name, I don't remember it now. And he said, oh, I look better in the camera than I look in person. After that he said, you know, CNN sucks. He said, well, I'm sorry, but I work for CNN. He said, I know, you don't suck, it's CNN. He said, well, if you're calling my employer that sucks, you're telling me that sucks. That was all he spoke with President Trump. Later on, when the pictures were published, President Trump tweeted that those were the worst pictures they had ever taken of him. That explains us and shows us a little bit his character and the way he's doing some things while president. Well, that is Kennerly's opinion. I don't like to make political comments in this type of videos, but I wanted to share this with you. I was excited, I enjoyed, I'm very thankful with the University of Southern California for having this invitation. I hope we have the opportunity of having more of these events in the future, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Please, if you liked it, at the end of the video, don't forget to press the subscribe button. Subscribe to my channel. I will be posting more videos about this and other topics, and I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you enjoy the future videos. Thank you very much, and have a nice day.